The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We are coming at you on November 7th, 2022, one day before the midterm elections, where I tell you, it just seems like the frustration that we're always slipping a little bit further into Biden's abyss, but maybe we can do a little something about that. We have a special guest on the show today. Let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon the Word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And on our lower left-hand corner today, we have our special guest, Mark Victor, who until a week ago was the U.S. Senate candidate for the state of Arizona for the Libertarian Party. And he recently stepped out, and we talked to him about that on another podcast. So, maybe if we might get into a little more of that, but if you want more details, you can listen to some of that podcast as well. But today, what we're going to talk about mostly is the midterms tomorrow. I mean, that's all that's on everybody's mind, and I'm sure it's on Mark's mind too, since he's been running in that. But everybody's talking about, will it be a red wave? And Leon, maybe I could get the visuals up. Republicans potentially unseating Democrats in unthinkable places, like potentially New York. Hochul might wind up losing to Lee Zeldin there. There's a lot of other places as well, places like I think Oregon and other places where people who they thought could never be unseated by a Republican are about to potentially be unseated. So the question is it going to be a red wave, or is it going to be a tsunami? And by the way, I have a little bit of a advice, I guess, for Democrats on the red wave. And this was from the Rittenhouse trial. They're one of the attorneys that seemed to be one of their heroes at the time, James Cross, said, "Hey, everybody takes a beating sometimes, right?" So anyways, what do you guys think about this? I mean, a red wave, or is this going to be something that, is maybe a little overblown or huge?
You want me to start, or?
Yeah, anybody wants to jump in? Yeah.
Okay, happy to jump in. Well, I think what's important to remember here is that generally speaking, the Republicans and the Democrats, we got to think about how they differ from the libertarian philosophy, right? The libertarian philosophy is don't aggress against anybody. The Republicans and the Democrats disagree with that. They say aggression is fine. And what they're arguing about is in what areas and to what extent should the government aggress against people, take your money and where should they spend it and things like that. We libertarians don't really reach those arguments. And so what happens is first one party gets control and then they aggress against people and do all kinds of things that people don't like. And then people say, oh my God, this is terrible. The other party is going to be the solution here. And then they swing back, and then there's a wave, if you will, to the other party. It doesn't take that much memory to think back when the Republicans controlled everything not too long ago. And we've got tired of that. A lot of people said, oh my God, we got to get rid of this Trump guy and all these other, now they're pushing tariffs and they're still spending. Trump brought at the time, two of the biggest spending programs ever seen in the history of our country. They added more to the debt. People said, oh my God, let's get back to the Democrats. At some point, you wake up and you say, look, neither of these parties has a real solution here. So putting it in that context, if you've been watching politics, right, each party is the savior for the sins of the last party in the next round. So yes, just based on that, I expect we'll see more Republicans. The typical Republicans, the ones who like to continue to aggress against people, will cause other kinds of problems, and then we'll be frustrated and say, let's go back to the Democrats. What we're saying as libertarians is there's another way here. How about we just stop aggressing and we let people run their own lives? And that's really the philosophy we're trying to bring forward. So, to the extent that some of those Republicans are what you might call libertarian leaning or closet libertarians, then okay, this will be a good thing. To the extent they're just aggressors who want to push their personal ethical positions, moral positions into the law so they can force them on everybody else. All right, I guess if you agree with this particular ethical position, maybe this isn't a bad thing. But if we step back from it and say, what's best for us as humans to live on the planet? How do we interact with each other in the best ways? The libertarian position, or what I now call the live and let live position, is the best position. So I think what our job should be as people who are for freedom and peace is to convince enough people, right? I mean, if you want to get off this merry-go-round, the only way off the merry-go-round is to win enough hearts and minds of our fellow brothers and sisters on the planet so we can then take control of things and stop the aggression, and then the resulting peace and prosperity and freedom will speak for itself, as it has everywhere else in the world where we've moved even inch by inch in that direction. I mean, look around the world. The best places to live are the ones that are most free, the most prosperous places, the highest standards of living. Those are the places that are most free. That's the reason people want to come to our country, right? Notwithstanding the fact that we could be so much more free than we are.
Mark, you think about live and let live, and it's a very nice principle. And as I told you before, I am into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But those are our ideals. But when we are looking at the practicality of the situation, should we be really looking at, well, we are stuck with maybe the lesser of two evils, and I use evils in quote, in terms of there's the Democrats and there's the Republicans. Well, the Republicans actually have a sort of libertarian wing of their party. Should we then be, from a practical sense, be looking at the lesser of two evils?
I think this is an area, and thanks for that question. I think it's a great question. This is an area, in my opinion, where reasonable minds disagree, right? This is about strategy and tactics. And given that we can't make the world exactly the way we want it, what is the best approach? Is it the lesser of two evils? Is it, building up the Libertarian Party? And I don't know. And I don't take a position that there's only one way here. I have some ideas. I think that the goal should be to convince enough people in their hearts and in their minds to adopt our philosophy, which, by the way, I think will happen. Will happen if, and this is the big if enough people hear and understand our message, which is the reason I think we need to present our message, and we need to present it in the most simple, easy to understand kind of way. That's the reason I'm promoting the Live and Let Live global peace movement, because I don't think there is a more simple yet more principled and uncompromising message than the message we're presenting it and in the way we're presenting it in the Live and Let Live movement. So I think minimally, if you're listening to this podcast and you agree with the sort of philosophy, the underlying philosophy, it's free to join the Live and Let Live global peace movement. All you got to do is say, I agree with rule number 1, don't be an aggressor. And I agree with the optional rule number 2, be a good human. If you check the box, great, you're a member of the movement. How does that help? When I can stand up and say we got 20 million members in our global peace movement, people will listen to what we have to say. So as a bare minimum, the least you could do is join the Live and Let Live global peace movement. The second thing that I think also comes under the category of the least you could do is blast it around on your social media. Tell people, hey, there's a global peace movement out there. Here are the principles. I joined it. You should too. What you do beyond that, to get to Leon's question, maybe you vote for the lesser of two evils. If the lesser is substantially less, right? Like the decision that I made to support Blake Masters over Mark Kelly, and to say, I don't think Mark Kelly's evil. He seemed like a very nice guy when I met him. His mistake is the same mistake a lot of people on the left make, which is to take their good morality I even agree with many of the time, like, for example, helping the poor, to say we should help the poor. I agree. I want to say loud and clear, I agree with this moral position. We should help the poor. The mistake is to convert that into a legal position, to put it into the law and force people to implement our morality. What I'm saying is, no, that's the wrong thing to do. Let's keep our moral positions in the moral realm outside of the law, and let's close ranks with these people. All we got to do is convince them that that's a moral view, and moral views stay outside the law. And the reason that's so important is because not just our moral views are people arguing to get into the law. Some people have different moral views, right? Like women should wear headscarves when they step outside. That's a moral view that some people want to get in the law. What do we say to these people? What we should say to them is not, well, our morality is better than your morality. Ours goes into the law, yours doesn't. That's what we're saying now. And I don't think that gets us to peace and freedom. That gets us to a fight forever. What we should say to them is, look, everybody's morality, yours, mine, everybody's morality goes outside the law. The law is a minimum standard of conduct. Don't digress. Keep your hands to yourself. Like, don't punch other people in the face. Don't take their toys. Don't put them in danger. Those are the rules you learned in kindergarten. Those are still good rules today. That's the minimum standard of conduct. That's what the law is about. Everything else is in the moral world, and we should push our views here. That's what Live and Let Live is doing. We're trying to persuade people in the moral realm to adopt our good moral views. And this configuration of this message, mark my words, will be the future of the freedom movement.
Tim, if you want to speak, your mic is mute. Oh, you're unmuted. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I'm just listening. We're in the realm of the political with gerrymandering and redrawing districts and stuff that I really get glazed over. Surprisingly, I'm more interested in economics, which glazes most people's eyes over. But in the case of all this political stuff, I kind of would just rather take a back seat if that's appropriate.
Me too, man. I don't like any. I'm with you. This political districts and all this. I have zero interest in all of this stuff. I also have some interest in economics. But, I don't think we're going to win. And I agree. We probably agree on everything on economics. But I don't think this is the argument for us, right? I don't want to have to convince the average person about economic curves and socialism and capitalism and which one. This is not the best approach in my view. The only thing that I would say, and the only thing Live and Let Live says about economics is the same thing we say about everything else. Just don't violate rule number one. So what's left over? Well, a free market. Nobody violates rule number one. To lay that out, rule number one is don't be an aggressor, the legal principle. So free market capitalism there's no reason to be upset about that. What you might call crony capitalism, where the government gets involved and forces one company to do something, usually at the benefit of another company or disadvantage that company. Okay, that involves violating rule number one. So crony capitalism is out. Socialism, why would we give any different analysis here? If people want to be socialists and they want to put their property together and act from each according to his ability and to each according to their needs, as long
voluntary socialism.
As long as they're not the only thing we care about in every analysis, no matter what the issue is, whether it's capitalism, socialism, or the drug war. If you're not violating rule number one, you should be left alone. So voluntary socialism, as Jason points out, perfectly fine. Where do we run into a problem? When they say, Jason is not part of our group, we'll force him to be part of our group. Well, as soon as we bring in the word force, we're now violating rule number one. So involuntary socialism, like involuntary virtually everything else, violates the rule and should be prevented. So that's really all we got to say. We should resist getting into arguments about what von Mises said or what Hayek said or what Milton Friedman said. Even though we may agree with what they said, this is unnecessary for us to win the agreement of our brothers and sisters on the planet. Let's just focus on rule number one and rule number two. If we don't say anything else, that's everything we need to say. Why say anything else?
Well, it's funny,
and
Mark.
if I had I'm sorry, Jason, but if I had anything to say, it would be that for a candidate to be in favor of sound money, which to me is fruit hanging way up on the tree, yet at the same time they would be in favor of continuation of the drug war, which to me is the low hanging fruit on the tree. I just don't understand how that can happen.
Let me
You know,
try to
because
I'm with you philosophically for sure. Sound money is I said it in the debate a couple of times and I got criticized. Mark, people don't know what sound money is. You used your, 3 seconds you had to say something by throwing sound money out there. Fair enough. But why might somebody take this position? Again, I'm not speaking for Blake Masters here, but somebody who might be a libertarian who wants to get elected as a Republican might say, I'm for sound money, but that drug war is really scary or something. They may back off that. That's fine. If you ask me about it, if you had asked me during the campaign, if they had asked me during that debate, Mr. Victor, how do you feel about legalizing drugs? I would have said, competent adults own their own bodies. They are the iron-fisted dictator of what goes in and what doesn't go in, period. I don't make those judgments. I have opinions. I may tell them, hey, in fact, I would tell them meth, bad idea, cocaine, heroin, bad ideas. But look, at the end of the day, as long as I'm going to watch you closely to make sure you're not putting anybody at risk, right? So you don't get to drive your vehicle. You don't get to use it on someone else's property. You don't get to use someone else's drugs. There are things in there. But if at the end of the day, you're a competent adult and you are not violating rule number 1, I have no basis upon which to complain legally about anything you're doing. That would have been my answer, crystal clear about that point. I think that's the better approach, and that's the one I want to convince people to give, but the world isn't quite there yet.
Well, it's funny this whole live and let live thing that you've sort of crystallized there for your movement. It seems so intuitive, and I think that's exactly why there appears to be a red wave right here. Is because the Democrats recently have appeared to be very much not live and let live in a lot of areas. They seem to want to censor what we say. They want to lock people in their homes, force vaccinations and masks, and then of course we even see their leaders not even living up to what they want to force the rest of us to do, which even makes it all the worse. But I think maybe that's the crux of why we're seeing this red wave. And maybe it's because people don't understand that there's a liberty option out there too, because we have this false dichotomy of two parties. But it just seems to me that they've become the anti-live and let live party at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on what issues are on the table, right? We just went through the Corona thing, and it seemed the Republicans were better here. But, and we got gay marriage too. But imagine you're gay and you want to get married and the Republicans are in and the Republicans are saying, sorry, you can't get married. Or, there are issues there. I had a friend who recently passed who was competent. He had ALS and he had to take his own life. For him, that could have been a very big issue. I mean, I raised that issue because I think it is a big issue that doesn't get enough play. Your right to decide the circumstances of your death, assuming you're competent and you're an adult and all that. That's just as big an issue for me. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same question as all of these other questions. They're all the same question. We could say there's only one question that was presented, which is who gets to make a decision about property, the owner or some other configuration, the people on the street, the president, the people in Congress, whatever property you're talking about. My position, in the position of those in the live and let live movement, is that's what it means to own property. You get to decide how it's used. The only restriction is you don't get to use it in a way that affects somebody else's equal right to use their property. That's where we draw the line, and that's the only place the line should be drawn. And so live and let live, in my view, does a better job of explaining what our position is. We're moving the freedom movement to the next level. We're adding a necessary moral principle, which, by the way, the world needs to hear us talk about morality. It really does. You want to solve the crime problem? Let me say something a little controversial here. As a 28-year criminal defense lawyer, and by the way, just for a little context, I'm not one of these criminal defense lawyers who dabbles. I've defended people in several first-degree murder cases with the death penalty alleged. I've done several of those at trial. Major felonies, federal courts, state courts. You know what the number one cause of crime is? Bad parenting. Or lack of parenting entirely. That's the real cause. This isn't something we can fix with the law. I'm not trying to change a law, get a law passed that says you must be a good parent. We got to look in the mirror and say, let's be better parents. Let's help other parents be better parents. Let's raise our kids with the right values and the right morality, dare I say. All this is beyond libertarianism. But if we want to fix what's wrong with our world, we need to start talking about ideas like civility. Can we agree to disagree in agreeable ways? Do we have to argue with each other? Can we be civil? Like, we don't have to call each other names when we disagree on things. We in the Live and Let Live movement are trying to chart a different course. You noticed in the debate, I didn't run any negative ads. I didn't call anybody names. I called it when I agreed with them. I said, I agree with so and so and such and such. He made a good point. When I disagree, I called them out in an agreeable way. So we are trying to lead and live the values, not just talk about be a good human, but actually be a good human. And I think this is missing from libertarianism. It is missing from libertarianism. And adding it in doesn't hurt our movement. It helps it, because a lot of people hear rule number 2, the moral principle, and now they listen. For the first time, they're saying, wow, someone's talking about civility and voluntary kindness and being open-minded and tolerant towards others. Let me listen what they got to say. So when we break the news that aggression is wrong, it's wrong to punch people in the face and take their things and to put them in danger. They say, obviously, of course this is right. Let's not make any exceptions to that rule. Let's apply it to all people. We don't care what color their skin is. Don't care. We don't care what language they speak, where they were born, if they're religious or not religious. We don't care if they formed a group. We don't care if they formed a corporation. And we damn sure don't change anything because the government is acting. The government should be held to the same do not aggress standard as every person, every group, every corporation. No exceptions, period. Simple message. And it says everything we've ever wanted to say, plus a piece that we should have been saying all along about morality. It's okay. We don't go too far into morality. We go far enough. We're not losing anybody here. Nobody says, Mark, I hate this be a good human stuff, but I love don't be an aggressor. Okay, there may be 1 or 2 white supremacists or people in that crowd who are agreeable to not aggress but are horrible humans. Fine. I'm willing to get them upset. Most people who say be a good human will recognize that not aggressing against other people is part of being a good human in the first place. But the way we deliver the message has been such an F that people haven't. It's the only explanation, because we know, the 4 of us know, if you understand the philosophy underlying the libertarian movement, you know this is the right answer for how people should be interacting on the planet. If you care about peace and freedom and prosperity, this is the right answer. Yet we're marginalized as crackpots because we have done such a bad job at communicating our message. Live and let live, I've said it before, will be our future. I'm encouraging the 3 of you and everybody listening to this show, check it out. If you think we got one word wrong in the Live and Let Live movement, email me, please. Maybe we'll change it. Maybe we do. But I don't think so. I think what we're saying is simple and consistent, and it's right, and I'm happy to stand behind every word.
Mark, you raised the issue about being good parents. I mean, we on this show have talked about the issue of fatherless homes, and that is a very, very big problem. Mm-hmm. But you also said that we cannot make any laws that will say, you are commanded here to be a good parent. We cannot do that. But on the other side of that coin, we cannot incentivize bad conduct. And I think the law does incentivize bad conduct, the welfare system in particular. Yeah. I mean, if you look at what have happened to Black families in the United States, starting somewhere in the 1960s with the Great Society programs, those laws that are, some of them are still on the books, incentivize bad conduct, which we end up with this epidemic of fatherless homes in the inner cities of America. So there are things we can do in the law, but it's not that we could command people to be good parents, but we could stop incentivizing bad conduct.
Well, of course.
I was just going to say, it almost seems like it's an issue of not putting more government in. It's an issue of getting government out. But go ahead, Mark.
Now, of course, I agree with everything you said. I would state it much more simply. I would say taking money from one person and giving it to against their will and giving it to another person for any purpose violates rule number 1. I don't have to get into a fancy argument that I happen to agree with that you just made, that we are incentivizing non-productive kind of conduct. I certainly agree. And let me fill in a little bit more detail with what I said. I was worried that you were going to say something a little different and correct me on something, so I'll correct myself. There are areas where the law should be involved in parenting, right? Because a parent is somebody who owes a duty to the child that they made. And so if you say, for example, a parent is not providing food, a parent is not providing shelter, a parent is beating the heck out of their kid, there are places where we can say, look, the parent is now violating rule number 1 by aggressing or by failing to act as a proper fiduciary guardian of that kid. And in those areas, okay, we can take action. Now, exactly, this is another area where reasonable minds disagree. We don't need the same rule in Massachusetts that we have in California or in Arizona. Within a reasonable range, right? No parent should ever get to beat the heck out of their kid or deprive them from life-saving medication. But there are areas in there. Can you spank your kid? How much can you spank your kid up to a certain point? There are areas where reasonable minds disagree. And I don't want to argue about this with my fellow live and let livers. I want to say put it in the local community, let them make a decision, move on. So I'm not saying there's no role whatsoever in the parent-child area. There are, but I don't think we could pass a law that says anything more than don't aggress, right, which is rule number 1. Because once we do that, now we've crossed that barrier. And other people will say, oh, well, being a good parent is, sending them to church and doing a whole other host of things that we think should be in the moral realm, not in the legal realm.
Fair enough.
Real quick too, I wanted to get your take on what are the midterms looking like in Arizona, Mark, and maybe you can pull up the visual real quick, Leon, on this.
Yeah, I think that we're at a point in time where the Dems have done such a colossally horrendous job, right? Now, some of this is absolutely earned and deserved, and some of it's not, right? I think that the Republicans are coasting here by saying, oh, look, inflation got so terrible it was fine 2 years ago, and now all of a sudden it's terrible, as if they are excused from their own printing money and throwing it into the economy. They are just as much to blame. We know why inflation went crazy here. Inflation went crazy here because the Republicans under Trump and the Democrats under Biden and all of them before printed up unprecedented amounts of dollars and flooded that through the economy. And at the same time, if you said, Mark, what would be the worst possible thing you could do right now? Well, let's decrease the amount of goods. Let's order businesses to close. So we increased the money supply in an unprecedented way. We decreased the supply of goods in an unprecedented way. Of course, you're going to get crazy inflation. So it's really both parties' fault. But the Democrats have done everything they could do pretty much to look as bad as they can do. So I would be surprised if we didn't get a red wave. What I'm hoping for is some of that red wave will include people who understand the reasons we get to freedom, peace, and prosperity, which would be to say, we might say libertarian leaning, which I don't love, by the way. How do you lean against aggression? It's kind of like you're being pregnant, right? You either are or you're not. Either you think it's wrong to punch people in the face and take their money, or threaten to punch them in the face and take their money, or you don't. I think there's sort of libertarians and non-libertarians, but okay, maybe for political reasons, there are people who agree with libertarian rules, but then say things like, well, I'm not sure drugs should be legal, to get elected. Maybe that's not my approach, to be clear. I like to say it all proudly. I'm very proud to take the position that aggression is wrong on all issues while still encouraging people in the right direction on moral views. I think this is the right position. Should have been our position from the beginning.
Well, I kind of want to transition to that issue on aggression too, but one last point on the national stage, and Leon, maybe we could get a visual up on this. As we leave the national stage on this red wave issue, there is an election going on in Philadelphia, and there is a guy there running. Two guys who don't really quite fit the liberty mold on either side, but on the Democrat side, there is a guy named Fetterman running, and he recently introduced himself as John Fetterwoman. And so I thought, in the interest of being decent people and not dead naming, if you live in Philadelphia, write in Fetterwoman. so that we can be decent people about all this. But it's funny though that all of this stuff that you're talking about, aggression, and what we're seeing is almost a wave of aggression to some degree on both sides. I mean, we recently saw this issue with somebody I guess violently assaulting Nancy Pelosi's husband. There's some kind of murky details around that, but we also saw somebody had threatened to, kill Justice Kavanaugh, showed up just outside his home. And then, of course, depending upon your take on the January 6th, there could be some issues of violence there as well, potentially. But yeah, we see this going from not so much a meeting of minds and a live and let live, but sort of like, hey, you're going to do it my way, or we're just going to get violent. It's almost like we've got a red wave of violence, and I don't mean to associate that necessarily with Republicans, but just this idea that it just seems to be getting a little more and more off the rails. What do you guys think about that?
I think there are. Oh, go ahead, Leon. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add into what Jason was saying about the appearance of violence all over the place. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, it was reported that Carrie Lake, who is the Republican candidate for governor, her office received some suspicious packages that contain some white powder. It's under analysis right now. I don't know what the results are, but it is specific to Arizona. But it's part of this whole thing about this epidemic of violence that we've seen in the political realm. So go ahead, Mark. I just wanted to add that.
I think that there are consequences of teaching people that some forms of aggression are okay. And that's essentially what we're teaching them, right? I mean, I think there are also consequences of teaching people that all aggression is wrong, like we want to teach, right? It's all wrong. And so it does bother me when I see, for example, Nancy Pelosi's husband gets attacked and the Republicans may make fun of that. We shouldn't make fun of that. We should stand against aggression of all types, no matter which side you're on. January 6th, this is another issue we have of trying to broad brush everybody. Some of the people there engaged in violence. For those people, we should act, right? There should be consequences if you engaged in violence. I think the vast majority of people there didn't engage in violence. And if you didn't engage in violence, we should treat them accordingly, consistent with the one principle that we really care about in the legal world, which is, did you aggress? So we shouldn't broad brush groups, right? Almost any statement that starts with all and then it talks about a group is going to be mistaken. And so I would just simply say we should stand against aggression on all issues, at all times, in all places, in all places. Aggression as defined as the initiation of force against another person or their property, fraud, coercion, or doing anything that creates a substantial risk of harm to another person or their property. That's aggression, and it's always the wrong thing to do, and it's wrong for everybody, groups, corporations, governments, period. Let's take that position on every issue, and let's be the group of live and let live people. I think it makes a lot of sense. So anyways, that's kind of what I'm saying. I try to be very, very consistent. Once they understand the two principles, the only thing left to do is to reason consistently with those principles across all issues. Lock them into the two principles. Almost everybody says, I love live and let live. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, what could live mean? Live your life. What else could it mean? It means, what does live your life mean? You're in charge of you. Body, property, money, time. That's the end of that discussion. Doesn't mean that I can't make suggestions on how you should live. That's rule number 2. I get into it right there. We got lots of suggestions. They're just suggestions. You can ignore them. Then there's the let live. If live means you're in charge of your body, property, money, time, what could it mean when we say let live? It means the same exact thing. Let other people, give them the same exact courtesy, afford to them the same courtesy that you want to live your life. Let them live their lives, which means don't aggress. We can get it all from the phrase live and let live. It makes perfect sense. Lock them into that and then talk about the issues. Do not talk about issues until you first get agreement on that underlying principle. That's the way to win the world, in my view, not because we're trying to be sneaky, but because we've got the better argument. We just need to make it in a way that they can actually understand. When that happens, we'll win the world.
Awesome.
Jason, I think we're getting close to Mark's
Yes.
hard stop.
So,
Okay.
so let's jump straight to the Knucklehead Noise Patrol then, and we'll wrap up. This is where we always like to end the show on something just kind of ridiculous that somebody has said or done, either in the media or in politics. And this takes us to, and maybe we could get the visual up here, Leon, but this takes us back to Biden again, who's our most frequent winner of this award. Our Knucklehead Noise
Wasn't
Patrol.
me.
Well, he just, it's just beyond the pale. Every week there's new material. but anyways,
are we aggressing against Joe Biden here?
Yes, we are.
I don't think so. He put it out there, so we're just. But on November 2nd, they put out a tweet, and they essentially said that seniors are getting the biggest budget increase in their Social Security checks in 10 years through the President Biden's leadership. And by the way, do we have the visual on that, Leon, or is that because we do have the tweet we could show here? So there is the tweet. And apparently this comes down to what we've been talking about how a lot of people who really aren't in the liberty movement don't appear to understand economics, because Biden is taking credit for essentially an automatic inflation trigger that is happening in the Social Security setup, where it literally tries to track inflation. So he didn't do anything specifically other than help to create inflation, which I guess he's taking credit for here. So, and of course, then they pulled the tweet down, which is another weird part of the story. And they said, well, it was missing context, and they didn't bother to put it back up and put in the context because I think the jig was up. Everybody sort of recognized this. And on a weird note too, I heard that by them removing that tweet, they may be interfering with the Presidential Records Act or whatever too, as far as by erasing tweets that the president has put out. So they may be getting into some other murky waters as well. Anyways, what do you guys think about this? It's just one thing after another with Biden.
But he was right to take credit for the inflation. He was absolutely right. Okay, so I don't know why they took the tweet down. I mean, they're printing money and spending money like there's no tomorrow. Of course, the guy was right. So I don't know why they took it down. Poor people.
Yeah. I don't know. At the risk of seeming to beat up on Biden. I don't have anything to say. The guy obviously doesn't know what he's talking about most things. So, chalk this up on top of that. But anyway, this is one of the best noise patrols we've had.
What I would say is this is evidence of the level of discourse that is going on right now. And if we think that we are going to win the day by making complex economic arguments, we're mistaken. We got to simplify our message while keeping it absolutely true to principle. That's what Live and Let Live is about. Simple, but absolutely no compromise. And so, again, I just take it as another plug to go to liveandletlive.org and join the movement. We've got to, look, time is, I hate to leave it on a bad note, but time's running out here, right? There are serious threats cropping up all over the world. We got to be more than just a discussion group. We need action. We need a movement. We need the people of the world to come together around some important principles. Live and Let Live is our effort to try to make that happen. I would invite everybody listening to this podcast to just get involved. If you want to get more involved, email me. Say, Mark, I want to start a chapter. You can donate money. We're a 501c3. There are many ways to get more involved. Let's do it. We got to win this argument once and for all. And the good news is we can. If we can just communicate the message to enough. We don't have to get everybody. American Revolution, maybe a third. I don't even think we need a third today. These are the most productive people on the planet. Can we get 20% of the people to hear and understand our message? I think we can. If we can do that, we'll win the day. I have no question in my mind about it.
Yeah. Well, I definitely
the 80-20 rule.
Yes. 80-20.
Well, I definitely agree with you too that the time is getting short, and we've got both debt and aggression just seem to be increasing at an almost exponential rate. Unfortunately, though, we're just about out of time. So again, check out Mark's site, and we also interviewed Mark in another show recently too, so you can go listen to a little bit more of his discussion about some of his background and his run for Senate there. So again, thanks so much, Mark, for joining us today. Thank all you listeners as well for joining us. And until next time, stay free.
Thanks, guys. Peace.
Thanks.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.